This video explains how to remove and install the standard mechanical seal and ball bearing in pump series 3, 6 and 12D, 4 and 6U, and 4 and 6T. Most other industrial series of IMO 3-screw pumps follow a similar method. Please observe all safety precautions. Keep the work environment and the pump components clean. We recommend you keep at least a minor repair kit on hand for each different installed pump. Minor repair kits include the shaft seal, bearing, all gaskets, and all O-rings. Remove the bolts holding the bearing retainer plate to the pump cover or casing. Set the plate aside. Do not remove the front cover unless more extensive disassembly is planned. Grasp the pump shaft by hand and pull to remove it from the pump. The ball bearing, bearing spacer, mechanical seal, and power rotor will come out as a sub-assembly. Remove the seal seat gasket. For pumps handling thick liquids, it may be necessary to remove the inlet head and thrust elements. When removed, gently tap on the suction end of the power rotor with a rubber mallet. Using a screwdriver or similar device, remove the outer bearing retaining ring halves. Use caution to avoid losing them as they may spring from their groove. The bearing is a press fit onto the shaft and will need a bearing puller or a manual press to remove it. If a press will be used, remove the inner set of retaining rings before proceeding. We recommend replacing the old bearing with a new one anytime the seal is serviced. Slide the bearing and bearing spacer from the pump shaft. If not already done, remove the inner retaining rings and then the stationary member of the mechanical seal. If the seal is of the elastomer bellows type, pull it off the shaft by hand using a twisting motion. If the seal is of the set screw type, loosen all the set screws before removing the seal from the shaft. Depending on the particular pump, there may be a spacer behind the seal. If so, slide it from the shaft and set it aside. Clean the shaft seal, bearing, and coupling diameters and carefully inspect them for corrosion or wear. Be sure there are no burrs or sharp edges at the retaining ring grooves where the shaft diameters change or where the old seal set screws may have raised metal. Clean and inspect the seal chamber stationary seat sealing shoulder. It should be free of grit, dirt, old gasket particles, and radial scratches. Mechanical seals are very fragile, and their sealing faces extremely delicate. Handle them very carefully and minimize touching the sealing faces during handling. The most common types of mechanical seals used in these pumps are the elastomer bellows or any of several set screw drive designs. The seals in these pumps do not require that their working length be set. The shaft, bearing spacer, and seal spacer, if used, will cause the seal working length or compression to be within its allowable limits. For elastomer bellows seals, clean seal faces with alcohol or other suitable solvent. Wipe dry with a clean, lint-free wiper. Visually inspect the seal running faces. Put a light coat of oil on the shaft and inside diameter of the bellows. Never use grease. Install the spring carrier and spring. For larger pumps, oiled shim stock, 1 or 2 thousandths of an inch thick, can be wrapped around the shaft at the seal diameter shoulder. This will minimize the chance of cutting the rotating seal member. If shim stock is used, rotate the seal while sliding it over the shim in the same direction of rotation as the shim stock was wrapped. Slide the rotating member onto the shaft with its running face towards the coupling end. Be sure the elastomer bellows has not rolled up. The seal faces should be perpendicular to the shaft, and the uniform edge of elastomer bellows should be visible at the rear as shown. If the bellows has rolled, the faces will appear cocked and the rear edge will not protrude uniformly, as shown in this example of an incorrectly installed bellows. The bellows will increase its friction grip on the shaft within about 2 to 3 minutes, so the seal must be correctly set quickly. Clean and inspect the seal rotating face again. Put a small amount of clean oil on its face. Slide the stationary seal member onto the shaft and gently rotate it against the rotating seal face to distribute the lubricating oil on both faces. Install the inner bearing retainer ring set. Slide on the bearing spacer. Bearing spacer prongs, if any, should contact the bearing outer race, not the stationary seal seat. Using a pipe or appropriate piece of tubing, press the new bearing onto the shaft until it gently seats against the inner retaining rings. It is critical that the pressing be on the inner bearing race only, not the outer bearing race. Never hammer on the bearing, as you will damage it, as well as the mechanical seal. If a press is not available, heat the bearing to about 200 degrees Fahrenheit using a bearing heater or toaster oven. Then slide it onto the shaft against the inner retaining rings. Allow it to cool before proceeding. Install outer retaining rings. Installation of a set screw type seal proceeds in a manner very similar to the bellows type. If the old shaft is being used, be sure any high spots caused by the set screws from the old seal have been stoned or polished out. Remove any rotating seal member retaining clips that have been attached for shipping purposes. If a spacer was used behind the seal, slide it onto the shaft before installing the rotating member. You may use shim stock, as mentioned earlier, to reduce the chance of cutting the inside diameter seal as it slides over the shaft diameter shoulder. Slide the rotating seal member onto the shaft, being careful not to cut its inside sealing O-ring. With the rotating assembly in place, continue assembly in the same manner as the bellows seal arrangement. When all power rotor assembly components are properly positioned, tighten the rotating assembly set screws, locking the rotating assembly to the shaft. Place the shoulder gasket into the seal chamber with a little grease or oil to help it stay in place until the power rotor assembly is reinstalled. Some pumps use an O-ring that is captured in the same location by using a combination bearing spacer, stationary seal seat, carrier. Insert the finished power rotor assembly into the pump, taking care not to disturb the position of the shoulder gasket. As the power rotor is inserted into the pump, rotate it back and forth to help it engage the threads of the idler rotors still inside the pump. Once the threads are engaged, the power rotor assembly can be pushed straight by hand all the way into the pump. Install the bearing retainer plate and torque the bolts to the torque values specified in the instruction book or assembly drawing. Over-torquing can cause the seal to leak. Note that the bearing retainer will not actually contact the pump cover, as it is intended to clamp the bearing outer race into the cover. Remove the seal chamber plug and fill the seal chamber with lubricating oil or the liquid to be pumped. Reinstall the pipe plug. This provides some lubrication and heat removal, minimizing the chances of a dry seal start. Thank you for looking to IMO Pump for your pumping needs. We have field service personnel available if you need on-site startup or maintenance supervision. We also have repair and overhaul capabilities at our manufacturing facilities if you would prefer to return pumps for our in-plant service. In-plant service normally includes a final running test as well as a new pump warranty. If we can help in any way, please feel free to call your local IMO sales office or representative. Thank you.